Before we get into this video, a quick reminder that the Aldas and Tomo live show on Friday the 4th of August in London is just 1 week away. I am so excited to see you guys there. We have a great group of guests lined up, which includes Matt and Tommy from P1, Katie Fairman, and also Dan and Blake from the Engine Braking podcast. Tickets are still available via the link at the very top of the description. It's going to be a really fun night, so I hope to see you there. A few months ago, I made a video talking about Alpine and how they seemed like they were kind of stuck in the middle of nowhere, not good enough to challenge the teams above them, and ahead of McLaren by enough points to seem like they were kind of fighting with no one. Well, that video has aged like absolute milk because just a few races later, McLaren now find themselves 40 points clear of Alpine, and somehow at this stage of the season, with arguably the second best car on the grid. Now, at the time, even though we knew the McLaren upgrades were coming, I don't think anyone honestly expected McLaren to take as big of a leap as they have. As Lando himself mentioned in an interview in Hungary, McLaren just a few races ago was a team that was sometimes struggling to get out of Q1, and now both of their drivers have challenged for the podium in back-to-back races. If you look at the points that they have scored over the last 3 races, and also take into account that we still have 11 races to go, if they can continue to be as strong as they are, then there is a genuine conversation about the possibility of them overtaking Ferrari, overtaking Aston Martin, and despite arguably starting the season with one of the worst cars on the grid, maybe even pushing Mercedes for that second in the constructors. McLaren for a long time have been a frustrating team to watch because just as there seemed to be signs of progress in 2020 and 2021, they then fell backwards with the introduction of the new rules in 2022. Even at the beginning of this year at their launch, new team principal Andrea Stella said immediately that the team was not entirely happy with the launch spec of their car. Now, this was because, as Stella put it, the team late on in 2022 identified multiple areas of opportunity, but these were not going to be ready for the launch spec of the 2023 car. McLaren's abysmal start then led to a massive technical reshuffle, with technical director James Key being ousted, and in his place McLaren introduced a trio of technical directors, with Peter Prodromo in charge of aerodynamics, David Sanchez, who's currently at Ferrari but who will start in 2024 being in charge of car concepts and performance, and Neil Halday in charge of engineering and design. And now, what I find quite interesting about McLaren's recent turn in form is that despite McLaren bringing in this brand new structure, correlation doesn't always mean causation, in the sense that these upgrades would have been months in the making and they would have been designed and developed under James Key, who the team ultimately decided to sack. It just makes me a little bit skeptical to fully jump on the McLaren bandwagon for the future because I still don't fully get the feeling that the team entirely knows what's working and what's not inside the team, and also if the new trio of technical directors from 2024 will actually work as intended and can just pick up and build on where McLaren are now. Either way, those are questions for future McLaren and future Aldas to talk about, because in the here and now, just as we criticize a team when they're underperforming, we also have to give them massive props for delivering and being able to challenge what seemed like the established top 4 teams. To me, the most impressive thing about McLaren and their biggest asset in their fight up the championship is not their car, it's their drivers. Lando Norris has been Lando Norris, and I'll get back to him in a minute, but in terms of Oscar Piastri, I think he's probably been one of the most impressive drivers so far this season, given the context. On paper, Lando is dominating Piastri just like he did Ricciardo, but in reality, I think Piastri has done a great job as a rookie to be as close to Lando as he is. More impressive than anything else, when he did get the upgrades in Silverstone, and when the car clearly became a podium contender, he has been able to raise his game under a higher level of pressure. This is something that I criticised Lance Stroll for not being able to do at the beginning of the season when it was clear that the Aston Martin was the second best car, and it shows that just because you have a good car, it doesn't guarantee that you'll automatically be able to get the most out of it. In Silverstone, Oscar would have been on the podium ahead of Lewis if he didn't get caught out by the timing of the safety car, and in Hungary he himself admitted that it was just a bit of inexperience of not knowing how to best manage the tyres that cost him. But on pure pace, there is no doubting that he is right up there. I think when you add the context of Ricciardo being there the past 2 seasons and how much of a revolving story that was around the team and how much noise and distractions that brought along with it, I think the fact that now no one is talking about issues with their driver lineup has been a massive positive for the team, and that's all to Oscar's credit. Or when it comes to Lando, I find him to be a really fascinating driver because a few weeks ago, before McLaren brought those upgrades to Austria, I did a video with Tomo where we talked about underrated drivers, and I noticed in the comments that when it came to us talking about Lando, there was a fair amount of criticism about just how highly we rate him. Funnily enough, since he's been scoring podiums, I haven't seen any of those comments since. And now I think that's just indicative of how Lando splits opinions within the F1 fanbase in terms of how good he actually is. I have religiously said that to me Lando is in the same caliber with the likes of Russell and Leclerc. Now, when Leclerc fans on Twitter see me comparing Charles to Lando, I think it makes their blood boil, but I genuinely believe that out of all of the drivers who haven't yet won a championship, to me the only drivers who I can say I am certain will be world champions at some point are George Russell, Charles Leclerc, and Lando Norris. McLaren understand the caliber of drivers that they have, or when the team has had stretches during seasons of having a podium-capable car like in early 2021 and now over the past few races, Lando has always delivered. Even last year when the car wasn't as competitive and Ricciardo was still struggling, Lando almost single-handedly made Alpine sweat for that 4th place in the Constructors. Even though Piastri still has some rough edges to sand out and some empty databanks to fill in as he gains more and more experience, as a combination, if the car stays competitive, allowing the drivers to challenge for the front 2 rows in quali, and then also allows the drivers to fight for podiums in the races, there is no limitations on the driver side that will stop them from closing the 80-point gap to Ferrari or even the 97-point gap to Aston Martin. The 136-point gap to Mercedes I think will be beyond their reach because even though Mercedes have had their ups and downs, the consistency from their 2 drivers has been a huge factor of why they are where they are. Still, looking back at where we started the season in Bahrain with a double McLaren DNF, just the thought that 11 races later they might be beating Ferrari or Aston Martin in the championship is a pretty incredible turnaround. But we have seen this season that even though Red Bull are dominating out front, behind them the order and competitiveness of the teams is basically changing from race to race. Can McLaren sustain this level of performance, and then looking even further ahead, can they then build on this for 2024 is the biggest question, because this team since around 2019 has shown so many glimpses, so many flashes of the team it wants to be, but it's never really delivered on that hype. The problem for them is that, yeah, they've been good for 3 races, but if they want to keep Lando Norris, they have got to show that this team will be capable of winning a championship when the next rule cycle will come around in 2026. The rumours of interest in him from Red Bull were all but confirmed by Helmut Marko, with him saying he has a contract with McLaren until 2025, but among the young drivers, he is by far the strongest. His youthful nature would also suit Red Bull the best. And now, Red Bull are not subtle at the best of times, but Helmut Marko coming out and openly admitting that they would want to sign him alongside Max, that puts a huge amount of pressure on McLaren, and it also puts a huge amount of temptation on Lando as he watches Max win all of these races. I know, having heard firsthand, that any content shoot that Lando is part of, McLaren are very careful to censor absolutely any mention of Red Bull or even Max unless Lando himself does it explicitly, and even then they try to limit showing him talking about Max or Red Bull. Make no mistake, McLaren as an organisation are paranoid about Lando's growing interest in Red Bull, and that is why this recent jump in form is not just important for the team, It's not just important for their potential fight to finish as high as second in the constructors, but it's important for them to start proving to Lando that this is a team that will give him a car to fight for the World Championship before he has to make a decision at the end of his contract. Well, there you have it. Once again, don't forget to check out tickets for the Aldas and Tomo live show in London in just a week's time on Friday the 4th of August. For more information and where to buy tickets, click the link at the very top of the description. And if you did enjoy this video, then don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.